I never realized how little I felt seen until Julian started noticing the small things. It wasn't that Mark ignored me exactly. He worked long hours, came home tired, smiled politely, asked about my day. But the smile didn't linger. The questions didn't probe beyond surface words. With Julian, even the casual greetings held weight. He remembered that I liked my tea strong, that I had an irrational fear of pigeons, that Tuesdays were always the worst for my mood. It began subtly. He'd send me a message in the afternoon. I noticed the curtains were dusty. I didn't touch them. I thought you might want to. Or he'd linger a moment longer when handing me a coffee during meetings at work, leaning in as if my presence mattered more than the task at hand. Mark never did these things. Mark saw me, but he didn't register me. Julian did. One evening, Mark was out for a conference dinner, and I stayed behind to catch up on some freelance work. Julian called. "Hey, I grabbed that notebook you liked last week. Thought it might help with your sketches," he said, casual. Yet there was an edge of sincerity in his voice that made my chest tighten. I laughed lightly. "You didn't have to. I wanted to. I noticed you've been frustrated with the pages you had. I just thought it might make your evenings a little easier." Mark never thought about my evenings. Not once. I realized that in the quiet hum of my apartment, in the absence of my husband, I had been waiting for someone to see me in the way Julian did, without demands, without expectation. The next week was worse. Mark came home exhausted, dropping his briefcase in the hallway. I tried to share something funny that happened in my day, but he only nodded, already absorbed in his phone. Later, Julian appeared at my work, unannounced, with a small bag of my favorite pastries. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," he said, smiling. I accepted them awkwardly, aware of the flutter in my chest. "Thanks, Julian. Really. You don't have to thank me. I like seeing you happy," he said like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. But it wasn't ordinary. It was dangerous in the way it made me feel noticed, valued, appreciated. All the things I had stopped expecting at home. I tried to push it down. I reminded myself I loved Mark. I married him. We shared a life, bills, routines, and Sunday morning pancakes. Julian was a friend, a coworker, nothing more. Yet in the silence after Mark left for work each morning, I found myself imagining conversations I might have with Julian, laughter echoing, eyes meeting, and the world narrowing to just the two of us. The tipping point came one Thursday. I was frustrated over a client project, emails piling, deadlines looming. Mark had promised to help me brainstorm after work, but he called to say he'd be late, caught in traffic. Julian appeared at my door 15 minutes later. "You're stressed," he said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "Let's sort it out together." I didn't resist. He sat across from me, patiently guiding me through my ideas, offering insights, encouragement, noting the clever details I'd overlooked. He leaned back, watching me with admiration, and something inside me snapped. Not because I wanted him, I didn't, but because I realized that I had been starving for attention from the man I lived with, the man I once trusted to notice me. Mark walked in an hour later. Julian had left, sensing the tension, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his cologne and a notebook I hadn't had the heart to put away. "Hey," Mark said. "How's it going?" "Fine," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. He frowned. "You sound off." "I'm fine," I repeated, forcing a smile. He didn't press, just went to the kitchen, grabbed a beer, and sat on the couch. I felt a quiet shame, a mix of longing and guilt twisting inside me. Mark had never cheated, never crossed any boundary. Yet here I was, emotionally adrift, drawn to someone who seemed to value the essence of me in ways my husband never had. It wasn't about Julian. It was about what he illuminated. The cracks in my marriage, the emotional distance I had accepted as normal. That night, Mark and I ate in silence. He didn't ask about my day, and I didn't volunteer. The space between us was no longer filled with comfort, but with unspoken truths. A week later, I found myself staring at my reflection, realizing that I didn't want Julian. I wanted Mark to notice me again, to remember why we fell in love, to see me in the same intricate, flawed, luminous way that Julian had. I wanted him to lean in, not because someone else did, but because he remembered who I was. The shift wasn't immediate. There was no grand confession, no dramatic argument. I started small, mentioning my sketches at dinner, asking his opinion on trivial things, laughing at stories I knew he would remember. Slowly, subtly, I drew him back into the orbit of my life. Mark began to respond. Not all at once, not perfectly, but in moments. A question lingering a little longer. A compliment slipped in casually. A hand brushing against mine during a late-night movie. I realized then that emotional fidelity wasn't just about avoiding someone else. It was about actively participating in the intimacy you once shared. Julian remained a friend, careful and distant. But I never needed the quiet illumination from anyone else again. I understood, finally, that betrayal didn't always come from an affair. Sometimes it was the slow, unintentional withdrawal of attention, the erosion of noticing and valuing each other in the everyday moments. And sometimes, it took a glimpse of someone else's care to remind you of what had been missing at home. Mark didn't know what I had learned until months later. And maybe it didn't matter. Because we had begun, in small, almost imperceptible ways, to see each other again.